The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. I hope you're having a good week. And things are going well. All right, today we're going to do I don't know how long this is going to take, probably a short segment on Mark Cuban, just being, I guess, Mark Cuban, and kind of exposing his real, if you will, I think, deeper philosophical beliefs that I think he's always held, but are now coming to the forefront. And then I'll basically open it up to your questions. So we'll see if you really eager to ask a question, go over to YouTube. You can use the super chat feature in YouTube and ask questions there. We'll see where it takes us. So other than the small Cuban video that I'm going to discuss, not much on my agenda today, but we'll see kind of where you guys take this. Little worried about video. Hopefully video and audio quality are good. I don't know, it's just things are just behaving weirdly, but hopefully things will straighten out here. Let's just see. All right, that's better. Okay, so as you know, Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, famous for his TV show, where I guess people make pitches and Mark and the other panelists decide whether to invest or not. So kind of a show that, should celebrate entrepreneurship and venture capital kind of decision making. I have no idea if any of those companies that were funded by the investors ever did well, or whether there's a real lesson here about it. But Mark has, it's called Shark Tank. The show is called Shark Tank. And Mark made his money as a internet entrepreneur in the 1990s. He sold this company. I think it was kind of one of the first radio broadcasting companies on the internet. And he sold this company really at the peak of the dot-com bubble, or close to the peak of the dot-com bubble, I think, to AOL. And what he did was somebody cook $20 doesn't buy much of a dinner. So $20 is an okay dinner, but not a great dinner. I mean, it's okay. But thank you for the contribution. Anyway, Mark Cuban sold his company to AOL, a successful company, and he then did the really smart thing that very few internet entrepreneurs who sold their companies at the top did. He basically hedged his risk. He hedged. So he sold it. I can't remember for what he sold it, but he sold it for whatever it was, hundreds of millions of dollars. Then he protected that. And when the dot-com bubble burst, he didn't lose anything. I know a lot of people who were worth literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And when the dot-com bubble, it got wiped out. Some of them landed up owing more taxes than they were worth because of just the way the tax years played out. They made the money in 99, and by the time they had to pay it in 2000, the stocks were so down, the tax bill was higher than what they actually were worth. Mark was smarter than that. Mark hedged his risk, took the money out of technology, and put it all into the Mavericks. And I think since then has done a variety of different entrepreneurial ventures, invested his money widely. I don't know how well he's done. I think most of his wealth comes from, at this point, the sale of the company and the Mavericks. He bought the Mavericks at a good time. The value of an NBA franchise from when he bought it, which I think is around, he must have bought it around 2000 has really gone up significantly. I'm just estimating it's 2000 because that's when the dot-com bubble burst. And he's done very well. He's done very, very well. He's a billionaire. I don't know how many billions he's worth. I don't know how well his other businesses are. I don't know how good of an investor he is in Shark Tank and other places. But he's a guy who is out there. Obviously, as the owner of the Mavericks, he's very visible. He is a guy who exudes, like enjoyment and stuff, and he's very vocal and very out there, right? And people listen to him. People to pay attention to him. And one of the things that I've known about Mark Cuban for a long time is that he is an Ayn Rand fan, or was an Ayn Rand fan. He was a huge fan of the Fountainhead. He would say, every time I get into trouble, every time I'm down, every time I have an issue, I go and read the Fountainhead. By the way, he never read Atlas Shrugged. He refused to read Atlas Shrugged. And I think the reason for that will become evident. But he refused to read Atlas Shrugged. Too political, too world, philosophical, too all-encompassing. He liked the Fountainhead. He liked Howard Roark. And for years, he said how much he liked it. He then, but he would never engage. So I tried to meet him a number of times. I tried to get him to support young people reading the Fountainhead, and nothing. He would not engage. I would send him an email. I'd get a response. The response was always, all the emails I've ever gotten response from Mark Cuban have always been one word, 2 letters, no. Always. Will you support this? No. Will you meet with me? No. I knew somebody who worked closely with Mark. Mark just would not engage on this issue, would not engage in Ayn Rand. By the way, Cook, no disrespect meant. I just laugh because I guess I spend a lot of money on food, and I spend a lot of money. I'm a foodie, so I spend a lot of money on meals, and that's what made me laugh. I really value the fact that you gave me this topic to talk about, and the support, the ongoing support, and your activity here, and I see you on Twitter as well. So thank you for all that. All right, so I'm going to show you the video. Here it is. It's on Yahoo Finance. He's being interviewed on Yahoo Finance. And he is, by the way, this video is being used by a number of leftists to say, look, you see, nobody believes in Ayn Rand anymore, right? There are no objectivists in the trenches. They're saying there are no atheists in the trenches. Well, now there are no objectivists in the trenches, so there are no free marketers in the trenches. Look, even Mark Cuban has basically thrown Ayn Rand under the bus. And he doesn't really, but he basically throws his own beliefs under the bus, or his own prior beliefs, or if he had any prior beliefs. Now, you'll know, just before we get to this, I did a video a while back about Mark Cuban and his defense of capitalism, and noted how much of a pragmatist he was in that video. So even irrespective of Ayn Rand, irrespective of what he says here, which I think it takes it much further along his rejection of capitalism, he's never been a good defender of capitalism. He's always been, his whole approach has been tinged with altruism and collectivism and anti-principle. And I think that's why he didn't read Atlas Shrugged, because he knew that it would challenge all of that, and he didn't want it to be challenged. So it's been, Cuban has been, has not been a defender of capitalism, ever. So it's not like he's completely changed. It's not like coronavirus has completely changed him. But he has gone from a compromising, moderate supporter of capitalism to an out-and-out statist, borderline, statist. I wouldn't say socialist, but borderline socialist. Let's listen to what, and if you listen to the whole interview, then you'll get more of a flavor of all the proposals now he supports, all the things he wants government to do, all the interventions, all the stimulus, all the things that are happening. All right. Here we go.
Julia again. In the last several weeks now, I'm sure you've probably had a lot of time to do quite a bit of reflecting, and I know we all have pretty much. And I'm wondering if in this period, if you've changed your mind on anything, whether it's, policy, the role of government, or, the role of corporations, if there's anything that's kind of shifted for you that maybe even surprised you.
Everything. 100.
Everything. So this coronavirus has basically changed everything for Mark Cuban. That's how solidly he held his beliefs before. Now, reality you should be open to changing your mind based on new facts of reality, but what exactly has happened in coronavirus that should have shifted your beliefs 100%? That completely changed what you believe? I mean, you have to wonder. Now, it's true, the coronavirus is a good time for reflection. It is presenting some real challenges and some real questions, but everything? Wow. All right. Everything is easy when you don't really believe in anything solidly, when you don't really, you're not really principled about anything.
I mean, I read Ayn Rand. I was, Howard Rourke,
He was never Howard Rourke.
Libertarian. I was, I thought government had a role, but smaller government was always better than bigger government. And that all changed.
See, and that's part of what happens with most people who have what they call libertarian positions or free market positions, is they don't, and I think this is true of Mark Cuban, but I think it's true of a lot of people. They don't know what it's really about. They some government, but small government, not too big government. What's the principle? What's the principle? And you have to be able to articulate a principle of why limited government. Limited by what? Limited to what? And of course, for Ayn Rand, the limit is limit for the protection of individual rights. By the way, that too is the limitation placed on the government by the founders. I think the founders viewed government as its sole responsibility is the protection of individual rights. But when you have it as a floating thing, big government is not good, then it's easy to give up on that. Big government is not efficient, then it's easy to give up on that. You need, if you're going to have an understanding of why do you hold that big government is not good? Is it because it's not efficient? Is it because politicians don't do as good of a job as the private sector? I mean, all of that is true for most things, but is that the fundamental? Is that why you're against big government? Or is there principle behind it? Is there something you clearly believe that the government's role to do is, and there's a conceptual framework for that. And that conceptual framework is all about individual rights, what they are, how they need to be defended, and why you have to have government to defend them. That's the argument against anarchy. Why you have to have limited government to defend them, why government is limited by them, and why a constitution must limit the role of government to the protection of individual rights and nothing else. Why anything else is an abomination, is a violation of rights. So all of that is a real intellectual project, which if you're going to defend capitalism, you have to know. You have to know. So let's see where he's moved now that he's no longer a free market guy.
If you were to ask me 4 months ago whether I thought we could lose 26 million jobs and potentially many more within the space of a month, I would have said you're crazy.
Now, I wonder if maybe we've lost 26 million jobs because of the government not taking its job protecting individual rights seriously, not living up to its responsibility to protect individual rights, which in this context would have meant taking this virus seriously early on, and as we've talked about, and I don't want to talk about it anymore, tested, tracked, and isolated. Done what North Korea did. What South Korea did. Done what Taiwan did. But our government defaulted on its responsibility to protect individual rights. Defaulted on a scientific responsibility. And then, as a knee-jerk reaction to the fact that, oh my God, this is a real disease. People are really dying. We need to do something. The knee-jerk reaction was to shut the economy down, to shut everybody's lives down, to force people. Now the economy would have taken a hit anyway. The Swedish economy, where they've left the economy basically open, is taking a major hit. Nothing like the hit we're taking. Nothing like the hit we're going to take. But even when it comes to losing 26 million jobs, did 26 million jobs just evaporate just because of COVID? And even if they did, let's say we'd had a virus much worse than COVID, which had caused businesses to shut down, not because of government, but voluntarily, which had really caused 26 million people to lose their jobs. Okay. So what? You couldn't imagine that? I get that. But does that alter your entire philosophy of life? Only if you didn't have one, only if you didn't have principles, and only if your thinking is fundamentally collectivist. Ooh, so what do we do about society? Instead of thinking about how individuals should probably prepare themselves for losing their job, individuals should probably prepare themselves for a virus or other things.
There's no way that's going to happen. And so dogma's got to go out the window. And so, a federal job
Dogma should always be out the window.
program, I would have been against that.
Now he's for federal jobs program? Really? And this is going to protect 26 million jobs? How? By hiring those people? With what money? Money taken from whom? And what would those people do with that money? Is it not giving jobs to some while killing future jobs for others? Is it not taking from our children and grandchildren and giving to people right now? Is it not forcing all of our lives to slow, pathetic economic growth into the future? And limiting innovation and real growth? The consequences to a government-run, real consequences, dangerous consequences that every socialist country in the world has experienced. Why won't we learn?
Federal minimum wage.
Federal minimum wage is now full, probably 15. Why? Why a federal minimum wage? What has changed? What has the coronavirus done to now say a federal minimum wage makes sense? And what about the poor kids who won't be able to ever earn a federal minimum wage because they can't produce at that level? Then what, you give them money so that they don't work? Or maybe then you do AOC's program, which is what you're suggesting, a federal work program where, the government employs them at $15 an hour. And again, where does that money come from? At what expense? At whose expense? At what job's expense? Where would that money have gone? What jobs would that money have created? I mean, Cook says, Cuban regards Ayn Rand as dogma, then he probably means he accepted Rand and free markets of faith. No, I don't think he ever accepted Ayn Rand on faith. I think he accepted Ayn Rand on emotion. I think he accepted how it worked on emotion. I don't think he ever understood Ayn Rand. I don't think he read Ayn Rand extensively. All he read was The Fountainhead. And I don't think he ever was really free markets. I think whenever he was pushed, whenever an issue came up, he reverted to a collectivistic, pragmatic solution. What Mark Cuban has never been is principled. He has no principles. He stands by no principles. And I don't think he's afraid of free market competition, Brad says. The idea that people who are not against the free market just don't want the competition against their own businesses, I don't think that's true. I think he just doesn't understand principles. He doesn't believe in principles. He doesn't hold principles. He is, he sees a problem, and he'll say this in a minute. He sees a problem. We need a solution. The problem is people don't have jobs. Okay, hire them. Who's going to hire them? Well, the government can do it. The government can print money. I can't do it. I don't have money. The government can do it, right? That's how he thinks. No principles, pragmatic, on-the-moment solutions, no real understanding of economics. No understanding of economics. The fact, and I said this about Trump many times, the fact that you can make money in the business world does not mean anything about your knowledge of economics. I know lots of business people who are rabid leftists and have no understanding of economics, nothing. Just Soros on. And yet they've made huge amounts of money in the markets. So it is not true that business people know economics. They know business. They know how to create value. They know how to offer you that value. And good for them. In this case, at the Mavericks, I think he's good at marketing. He's good at running this business, however you want to define the business. But He doesn't understand economics, and he doesn't, again, hold the principles, individual rights, for example, necessary to be able to defend in your own mind, never mind to other people, the idea of freedom, the idea of capitalism. He is a perfect example of a pragmatic business person who can solve problems within a particular realm over a particular time frame, but cannot think in principle over long ranges outside of his specific domain of expertise.
It's that there's just so many things that I think we need to do now, and that's what entrepreneurs do. That's what leaders do. When you face the circumstances you have and you deal with it.
And dealing with it means throw out all your principles and just come up with solutions. Like locking all of our lives up, like shutting down the economy in our lives. Like, that's a solution. That's powerful leadership, right? Instead of the actual solutions, which is having a real plan, deploying resources to actually execute on the protection of individual rights. No, we want these knee-jerk solutions that have nothing to do with science, that have nothing to do with economics, that have nothing to do with long-term consequences. To hell with long-term consequences. What matters is what's right now. People don't have a job. Let's just use the government to give them a job.
Effectively, all these trillion-dollar investments are a put for, but this put has got to be not for the wealthy and not for big business, but for working people.
So he wants $1 trillion investment. It's not an investment. It's a redistribution. It's not an investment for working people. And why does he want this? Why does he want it to go to working class people and not to rich people? Now, he doesn't give the altruist reason, which they're poor, they're suffering. No. He gives the economically ignorant answer. He gives the AOC answer. He gives the Bernie Sanders answer. And this is why I've said there's no differences between people left and right these days in terms of their understanding of economics. They all agree. Here's why we need to give the money to the working class and make sure that the rich don't get it.
Unless we lift up from the bottom, we're not going to have any consumer demand, and it doesn't matter how much liquidity is in the system, the risk hasn't left the system.
So what we need in the system is consumer demand. Now, why would consumers demand when, what are they going to demand when nothing's being produced? No answer. I did a whole show on production as the primary, not consumption, why consumption is not the driver, why Keynes is wrong when he says that it's all about aggregate demand. It's not about aggregate demand. It's about supply, and if you assure supply, then you assure jobs, then you assure specific demand. It's not about lifting up from the bottom. It's about reducing uncertainty for entrepreneurs. It's about increased investments. But to do that, what you need is not to increase demand. What are people going to use their checks for if they get a check right now? What are they going to do with it? They're going to buy groceries, more toilet paper, and they're going to leave the money in the bank because they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's not going to be demand for hotels. There's not going to be demand for airplanes. There's not going to be demand for computers. There's not going to be demand for the kind of products that we actually need demand for if we're going to get out of this, which is demand for the products that actually grow and enhance human life. No, because of the uncertainty, because of the risk, people are worried about their dinner. They're worried about their lives right now. And that doesn't help the economy. What you need right now is to reduce the uncertainty. Now, that's hard. It's hard without doing what you should have done to begin with. And I know I repeat myself, which was test, track, isolate. Without that, without knowing the magnitude of the problem, without knowing the magnitude of this disease, the real deadliness of this disease, the impact it really has on the lives, and uncertainty is going to be rampant. By shutting down the economy, by telling people, oh my God, you're all going to die.
So Mark, based on what you just...
Whether you're 20 or whether you're 70, you're all going to die. That kind of hysteria is what creates uncertainty, that shuts down an economy, that makes it so difficult to grow the economy in the future. Giving people $1,500 checks is not going to change that. Now, this crisis is caused by government, by the government response. It's caused by the virus. But we could have handled the virus if we had a decent government. We cannot handle the virus because the government is making it 1,000 times more difficult for us to deal with the reality out there. Because we're not getting the information we should have getting, and because they're panicking us, and because they're making it legal for us to produce. Now, this guy asks a smoky Ayn Rand question too. Watch this.
Said this question will annoy Dagny Taggart and John Gold. But
it's not the question that will annoy Dagny and John Gold. It's the answer that's going to annoy them.
Ayn Rand reference. Why not, after we get past, as we slowly start to bring up, why not, based on what you just said about demand, why not have the government, there are 200 million adults in the United States, send every adult $1,000 a month. I think, forgive me because I get zeroed out. That would be roughly, we're talking about $200 billion a month. Wouldn't that be a more effective way to deal with what we're dealing with as opposed to these programs?
Absolutely not. Look, and I know the UBIers are like Bitcoin.
So this is a UBI question, and notice here Mark's answer. It's completely collectivistic. It's completely, I mean, just listen to how he phrases this. It's truly stunning.
They're going to come and attack when I tell you what I'm about to tell you. But first, I'm not against UBI for a partner who stays home to watch children, right? That makes sense because that's a job, and that.
Yeah, so let's redistribute wealth from all of us to your partner who doesn't want to go and work or chooses not to go work. And it could be a rational decision. I'm not saying it's a bad decision. But why am I supposed to pay her? Let her husband pay her. So UBI is good. Redistribution of wealth is good from people who have jobs to people who don't have jobs. That Mark Cuban is on record for supporting.
Value. But I'm going to quote JFK, or paraphrase JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Because we need.
Now that is one of the most evil political statements ever made. That is one of the most evil political statements ever made. Ask not what the government can do for you, but what you can do for the country. That's pure collectivism. That's pure statism. That's pure fascism. It was uttered by John F. Kennedy, a pragmatist, unprincipled politician, although compared to our current politicians, he seems like a epitome of virtue. But what does that really mean? Remember, our government, i.e. the American government, is our servant. It is exactly about what the government can do for me. It is exactly about how the government should or shouldn't protect my rights. That's what the government is there for. It's to serve me in the one function that I need them to serve me in, and that is the protection of my rights. It's not my responsibility to do for the government anything. Respect the law. Ayn Rand talks about this in The Fascist New Frontier, which is an essay she wrote in the 1960s about the John F. K. administration and about this kind of attitude. That you as a citizen, your job, your responsibility is to government, to the state. No, that's not America. That's not American. The state is your servant, there to protect you, there to defend you, there to respect and protect your rights, and otherwise leave you free to live your life based on your mind in pursuit of your values. That's what America means. But Mark, like most people, is a collectivist. What does the country need? And is in opposition to a blanket payment for everybody, universal basic income, is that it's not good for the country because it provides incentives for people not to work. Let's listen.
People to contribute. And while UBI...
Not to work, to contribute. Sorry, God forbid you work and you earn a living and use that living to pursue your own self-interested values. No. That's not good. It's about contributing. So you work so that you can pay taxes, so that you can create economic activity for your fellow man.
It's great for individuals and gives them a lot of creative control and personal control over their life, and that's great. Right now, we need people to contribute to the economy. And if that means a federally guaranteed job where you're working as a crossing guard managed by the folks at AmeriCorps or the people in the Peace Corps or whatever organization, then I'm fine with that. If it's a federally created job for testing and tracing, that is going to contribute to the economy because we need people to do those jobs. Otherwise,
notice that those jobs are not necessarily, now I'm all for the testing and tracking, but he wants federally, paid for jobs that are basically digging ditches and filling ditches. No productive value, because he, like AOC and like Bernie Sanders and like many people, the Keynesians out there, believe that what drives the economy is demand. What drives the economy is not production. It's not the work. It's the fact that they get paid and then they go and consume. Now, he would like them to do things that add value. Not value as the market dictates, value as Mark Cuban dictates, value as the bureaucracy dictates, value as democracy dictates, value as the state dictates.
Fall behind. So maybe in another world, UBI is a great solution, but where we are today, other than for partners staying home with kids, I'm not a fan.
All right, I think you get the picture. There's nothing, he basically goes on and on about this stuff. So Mark Cuban is a statist, a pragmatist, a collectivist. I don't think there's anything really new here. Because he mentions Ayn Rand, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of present it, but I showed you a defense that Mark Cuban made of capitalism a few months ago. Nothing has changed. He's just gotten worse. He's become more of a statist, more of a collectivist, and he's more explicit about it. So the whole idea of I'm against UBI because I want people to contribute. I don't want to just give them a check. I want them to work for that check. Work for whom? Not for themselves. Work for the state. Work for the benefit of the state. And that is the essence of fascism. That is the essence of sacrificing the individual, sacrificing lives, sacrificing futures for the sake of the state today, for the sake of the collective, for the sake of the common good, the public interest, fill in the blank, any one of those. That is what this is all about. And this is not unusual. So, Mark Cuban is not unusual here. This is the common belief. This is the popular belief. Left and right don't disagree on this. There's no difference today between left and right on these issues. There's no individualism left today in the political spectrum. There's nobody in the entire political spectrum who stands even mildly for individualism. Terry suggests this statement: ask not for handouts, do productive things for yourself, but by extension for your country. No, there is no by extension for your country. What does that mean? Did Steve Jobs invent the iPhone by extension for his country? In what way does this country benefit from it? Who is the country? The only sense in which the country here has meaning is that isn't it great to live in a country in which people can innovate, in which people could create values for themselves, and yes, by extension for other people. But the fact is that the other people who benefited from this were people all over the world. Everybody's benefited from the iPhone, not just Americans. So yes, in the Declaration of Independence, that we the people, that defines our political status, and it defines who the government should defend, whose rights should be defended. But it's not the case that you, as an individual, owe we the people anything other than a respect for the law of the land. It's not the case that you, as an individual, should produce for the people, even as an auxiliary benefit. It's not clear to me that there is an auxiliary benefit to we the people. That there's an auxiliary benefit to the people who use Apple, but the people who don't use Apple. And taxes, which is what so many Republicans talk constantly about, we need to revive the economy so people can pay more taxes. No, taxes are not the standard and are not the reason for freedom, and not the standard for deregulating, not the standard for anything. It's not, you don't work in order to pay taxes. You don't create, you don't produce, you don't innovate in order to create taxes, which is what so many of people mean by that, right? No, I mean, I produce for me and for my customers, and yeah, other people benefit from that, but those people are all over the world. And, I would pay my taxes, voluntarily if I thought I was getting a value from it, if the government was actually protecting my individual rights. I pay enough today to fund the protection of my rights to the extent that they're protected. I try to minimize that funding because most of what the government does involves violating my rights, not defending them. All right, we'll go to your questions. We've got a lot of Super Chat questions, so thank you for all of those. Before we get to that, let me just note, I just read an essay, a really good essay, really interesting essay that I think will get a lot of people thinking, and I think there's a little bit of buzz already, a little bit on Twitter. Hopefully there'll be even more, by Brad Thompson, who I interviewed here about a month ago or a few weeks ago. I can't even tell time anymore. And it's in a magazine or online website called The American Mind, which is a publication of Claremont Review of Books, which is kind of it's one of the premier conservative publications. One of the premier, if you will, classical conservative publications. And the article is called The Rise and Fall of the Pajama Boy Nietzscheans. And it covers some of the topics I have talked about on this show in the past, whether it's the national conservatives, whether it's the Bronze Age perverts, whether it's other types of reactionary anti-founding fathers conservatives. And Brad, of course, wrote the book about, recently published a book about the Declaration of Independence. And this is, in a sense, him defending the Declaration of Independence, the founding principles of this country, the whole Enlightenment thinking, the classical liberal tradition of the Enlightenment, defending it from primarily, he mentions the left and he mentions the 1619 Project, but given that to the Claremont Review books or the American Mind, he's primarily defending it against the attacks on the right. And I think it's good for Brad. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they respond. The American Mind has already said that they will have essays in response to Brad. So it will be interesting kind of the exchange between the various factions within the conservative movement. So I highly recommend the essay. I might bring Brad on to discuss the essay. There are a few things, I have a few quibbles with him on in the essay, a few things I would, I don't think we actually disagree, but a few things that I think he grants them too much. But the essay's fabulous, so go read it and support it, tweet it, get it out there, get it exposure, because I believe that the real enemy is on our right, and I think the real enemy will have the right and the left united around a statist, fascist-like agenda. I think that is where we're heading, and we need to continuously fight the left and everything it represents, but at the same time we need to fight the fascist, anti-founding fathers, anti-enlightenment elements on the right. And I think Brad has certainly, contributed to that fight immensely with his book first, defending the principles of the founding, and then secondly in this essay. And share it, support it, get it out there. That'd be great. Get it read. All right, there's a question here about Mark Cuban, so let me take that one first, or a number of them. I wonder if Mark Cuban's sudden shift isn't just a result of COVID, but more the result of trying to paint himself as a billionaire who is needed. I mean, all the billionaires should exist rhetoric. I mean, I don't think so. It might be psychologically. I think it also has to do with the fact that he's thinking of running for president, and he needs to position himself. He thinks in the center. I think he's positioned himself quite to the left, but position himself in the center, and kind of make himself out to be a bleeding heart billionaire, a billionaire who cares, a billionaire who's not heartless and who cares about the working class and so on. So I think it's a combination of things, but I think it's primarily the fact that he never was a free marketer. He never was. He was always a statist. And I think whatever little bit of free market element he had in him was always defended on utilitarian, pragmatic, shallow grounds. And I think that has all collapsed around him. Those grounds, the grounds which he had, have just disappeared. And now we have 26 million people unemployed. And he's thinking, what do we do? How do we support them? We have to do something. The government has to do something. And the answer is, well, the government can just print money. And what the hell? We printed money after the great financial crisis. Nothing bad happened. So what the hell? And it's not like there are economists and people out there telling him, no, Mark, that can't be done. That's wrong. That's bad. That will destroy the economy. I mean, good economists, credible people he would listen to. No, nobody's saying that. Everybody's on his side. So I just think he's fickle. I think he wants to bolster his position as a billionaire, bolster his position as a popular person. I think he's very much a populist. He wants to appeal to the people, and he might have political ambitions. We'll see. I once thought that I would vote for him if he ran for president. No, I would not. Not given where he is right now. All right, Cuban, Rogan, and Peterson are all charismatic. What degree of style are important or not in terms of growing a following or intellectual movement? I mean, I think style matters, but I think it's far from enough. I think you have to have passion. I think you have to exude a certain amount of passion. You have to give the sense to your audience that you care. And I think Cuban, Rogan, and Peterson, in different ways, they have different styles, but they all get a sense from them that they really care. You have to be articulate, and you have to have expertise in something. You have to have some credibility. And in Cuban, his credibility is that he's a billionaire. With Rogan, his credibility is, whatever he did before the talk show and everything. And with Peterson, it's just he's a psychologist. He's an academic, and he's well read, and he's really, really knowledgeable. Right? I don't think that's true, for example, of Rogan or Cuban. I don't think they're particularly knowledgeable. Peterson is incredibly knowledgeable. He knows a lot of stuff, right? Agree or disagree with him, he knows stuff. Cuban and Rogan don't know much, necessarily. But they are passionate, they're authentic, you get a sense that they really mean what they say. They have a presence, they talk with confidence. Right? And they have some area in which they've distinguished themselves. What else? They're unafraid. I think they're unafraid. They're unafraid to take on issues. They're unafraid to express opinions about controversial issues. They're unafraid to be challenged. They're unafraid to go up against people. Right? So I think those are the characteristics. And I think that's important. Now, to actually have a following, it depends on, I don't think Rogan's following is an intellectual movement. I think Rogan's following is he's interesting and he brings us interesting guests and he's very entertaining and he's sometimes really funny. I think Peterson, it is an intellectual movement. He has something to offer people. I think a lot of it is wrong and shallow, but he has something to offer people, and he's challenging them, but doesn't challenge them too much. With Cuban, I don't think it's an intellectual movement. I think he's a business expert. He's a TV personality. It's interesting to hear what he has to say about business and about these other things. And, we've come accustomed to wanting everybody's opinion about politics. Right. So I think style matters for these things, yes. And I think that it's crucial. I think there is something to charisma. I think some people have charisma and some people don't. And it's sometimes hard to put a finger on it. It's how you present yourself on stage, how you speak, the confidence, the passion, the boldness, the willingness to be controversial. All of those are essential for charisma. Right? And you can see that in a Churchill, you can see that in a Reagan, you can see that in a Margaret Thatcher. You can see that certainly in Ayn Rand. And then there's the content. And the content better be appealing in some way to some people. But that will determine how big of a following you get, is the content. Right? And charisma is hard to bottle up. It's hard to do a course on charisma. It's hard to fake charisma. Some people have it. Right? Some people have it. Although I think you can develop it. There's certain principles you can probably figure out and develop. I mentioned a few of them. And I think most of that is learnable. All right. Let's see. So let's start at the top here. If Hillary had won, these lockups would never end. Is it good that we have a Republican president pushing back against these leftist governors? Or if Hillary had won, would the right be more in force protesting this? So, you seem to know what would have happened if Hillary had won. I don't. Right? It's hard to tell what would have happened if Hillary had won, because it's hard to tell what would have happened in January. Would Hillary have had more respect for her scientific advisors? For the CDC, for example. If you look at the CDC's plan pre-COVID for what to do in a case of a pandemic, lockdowns don't appear as an option. That is not part of the plan. It's not part of the plan. The plan is a good plan. The plan primarily is test, track, isolate. So who knows what Hillary would have done? Hillary might have listened to the CDC, listened to the experts, ramped up testing, but she might not have. I don't know. She might have tried to ramp up testing, but not freed up the FDA, and as a consequence, the testing would have failed. Just like when Trump ultimately did go for testing, it completely failed because he didn't loosen up the FDA or CDC. Right? So the real question is, would we have got to a state where all these governors felt they had no option but to do lockdowns? And by the way, Republicans did lockdowns too. What is it? 45 states or 43 states locked down. Republicans and Democrats. Most states, I think, are governed by Republicans. But the reason they did the lockdowns primarily was because the federal government had failed so badly. The federal government had no plan. The federal government projected no knowledge, no confidence, no ability. Mike DeWine in Ohio locked down Ohio and is still locked down Ohio. But all Republicans governors locked down their states. Again, with the exception of 7, I think. Texas was locked down. So the question is, would under Hillary have the federal government failed as badly as it did under Trump? So you can say, yeah, Trump is at least pushing back against leftist governors on the lockdown. He isn't really. He's doing it with half a hand. It's kind of pathetic what he's doing. But Trump got us to this. Trump put us in this position. Trump is the one that didn't take this seriously. Trump is the one that refused to adhere to the warnings. Trump is the one that ignored this. Trump is the one that told us there are only 15 cases and we're going to have it solved in a week. Trump is the one that kept brushing it under the carpet, kept evading it, kept ignoring it. So you can't argue that a Republican president has done any good here. Now, even when it comes to lockdowns, Trump was harassing de Blasio because de Blasio wouldn't lock down New York fast enough. Trump criticized Georgia because it opened up sooner than what Trump wanted. Trump has no views. I mean, it's almost better to have a Hillary. Let's say we would have still had lockups and she'd be for the lockups. And then I agree with you. Then the right would have coalesced against something. It would have had one voice. But now you have a situation where Trump stands for nothing. Sometimes lockup, sometimes not, depending on the day, depending on who asks him the question, depending on the tone of voice the question is asked in. He's a child with no coherent point of view. So are we for Trump when it comes to lockdowns? Or are we against Trump when it comes to lockdown? I don't know, because I don't know what his view is. It's Wednesday today. So, is Wednesday a for lockup day or an anti-lockup day? And is he for testing or against testing? There were days where it sounded like he was for getting the government involved in more testing. And lately, it seems like the federal government is doing nothing with regard to testing. So, for or against? Where does he stand? Nobody knows. There was no there. So at least with Hillary, first of all, I'm not sure she would have screwed it up this badly. I think she would have had better people around her, not better philosophically, not better politically, but just better executors. The plan was there. The CDC had a plan. When I had Amesh Adalja on the show on February 1st, he said, there is a plan. We've talked about this for months. Years. We've been thinking about this. We've planned this. We've simulated this. We have a plan. The CDC knows what it's doing. He was confident that this would not be a big deal because he said there is a plan. But then the Trump administration completely botched the plan. Now, maybe Hillary would have as well. Probably she would have. But I'm just saying, it's hard to abstract away from that. So I generally think that just like the financial crisis, I think it would have been better if a Democrat was in power during the financial crisis. Capitalism would have been blamed for it quite as easily. Obama would have never got elected. Lots of good things would have happened if the financial crisis would have happened when a Democrat was president. In that case, John Kerry, who I voted for. I wonder if given this, if it wouldn't be better if a Democrat was elected, and we go into this election, the Republicans beats Hillary, and the Republicans sweep the House and the Senate, because everybody is so upset by the way the government handled coronavirus. But these things are hypotheticals. I mean, who knows? The fact is, Trump is president, and we're heading towards an election. And what do you do? What do you do? I think it's a disaster. I think whatever the outcome of this election is going to be a disaster, and I think, and I don't see right now a way out of this. I don't see a way out of it. All right, please say something about the People's Party forming on a live call tomorrow out of LA with Bernie's support. Interview on Jimmy Dore with Attila got 110,000 views and will scare the hell out of you. All right, I'll check that out. I'll keep this and check it out. The People's Party. All right, well, it's not going anywhere, so I'm not too worried about it. Do some billionaires consider philosophical questions in the culture to be unnecessary because they are billionaires? In other words, they're living proof that great success is possible, no worries. Yeah, I'm sure that's true. There's some billionaires that say, look, I mean, you might complain about the society, you might complain about the world, you might complain about the culture, but hey, life's pretty good. I did well. and you can do well. And, regulations, not too bad. Look, the environment that I'm in is pretty good. So, yeah, I think there's definitely a certain sense in which billionaires think that maybe they don't even need philosophy because, hey, they succeeded without one. And they don't completely comprehend, although they do deeper down, that being successful means more than being successful in business and being successful in life. It means having a happy, fulfilling life of happiness. And I wonder how many of them are happy. And the fact that so many of them dabble in, I don't know, Eastern mysticism and all kinds of superficial philosophies and self-help gurus and things like that suggests to me that even though they're billionaires, even though they've been successful, even though they think they know everything, they're still searching. They're still looking for answers. They still, we know, need philosophy, even though they won't acknowledge that it's philosophy. And they're looking in the wrong places. And they keep looking because they can't find the right answers because they're looking in the wrong places. So yes. All right. Hi, Yaron. Any thoughts on why the U.S. is leading the world in coronavirus cases, 32%, and deaths, 28%? I'm not sure 28% of what. By such large margins. 32%, what does 32% mean? We have 32% of testing? I don't think that's true. 28% of deaths, so 28% of those tested die? That's not true. So I'm not sure where the numbers are coming from. I don't think we're leading the world in death per capita. I think Belgium, for example, has a higher death per capita than we do. I think Italy and Spain had higher deaths per capita. So I'm not sure what we're leading the world in. I mean, I think there's a legitimate question is, why is it so bad in the United States? Not as bad in Sweden, although death per capita in Sweden are higher than the U.S. Deaths per capita. Let's just see. Let's just Google this. So I'm not sure where the 32% and the 28% death per capita from COVID. Google is amazing. Now, granted, I'm not in a position to check the data, so I'm just doing this on the fly. Death per capita in the United States, cumulative tests, confirmed cases per million, confirmed deaths per million. Let's see the data, because in a chart I can't actually see it. Oh, I have to download I don't want to do that. Let's see. Let me share this with you. There. All right. So that is the graph. Again, the source here is ourworldindata.org. So I'm not vouching for this. This is just an example. Okay. So here is cumulative tests per million, right? So that's how many we've done per million. It looks like if we go to the left-hand side, you can't see it. One second, let's scroll down here. So it's like 30,000 per million tests. Confirmed deaths per million looks like 4,000 per million. And it looks like that's cases. And confirmed deaths per million is barely registered here, so I can't tell, and we can't compare. But what I can do is if I scroll up, that is South Korea. And this is the difference between the U.S. and South Korea. Right? Look at the confirmed tests, the cumulative tests per million. Oh, wait, that's not per million. Don't give me that. What, are they doing this differently? Yeah, forget it. That's not very valuable. So let's see if we can compare to other countries. Yeah, I'd have to pull it up. This source is not very easy to read and interpret. So it's hard to say. But I think the reason we have a lot is a lot of deaths per million is, I mean, oh my God, there's a graph that's just insane. Total confirmed, but total confirmed doesn't help me. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it requires a whole analysis. But I think one of the problems in the U.S. is obviously we don't test enough. We have not isolated, we've not tested, gotten the positives and isolated people. We've not done any of the contact tracing and warning of people who came in contact with you to get tested. So we've only tested people, not only, but mostly tested people who are symptomatic. And as a consequence, I think we have blown it. We don't actually know what the extent of the disease is. We didn't catch it early enough. We let it get out of hand. We let it spread in places like New York, in dense places like New York. In the rest of the country, if you take New York out of your calculations, then the rest of the country looks much better than the rest of the world. I mean, New York is much worse than anywhere else. And particularly much worse than, much worse than anywhere else. Worse than Washington State, worse than California, worse than the Midwest, worse than anywhere else. And as a consequence, it kind of skews the results. But, you know, there's a lot of things we don't know about COVID. I certainly don't know about COVID, but we don't know about COVID. For example, yeah, but this is, so Jax is saying, according to World Media, world deaths is 298,000, of which the United States has 85,000, which is the highest number. But we also have a very large population. So the next highest is UK, 33,000. But UK has a much smaller population. So you have to adjust for population. And it's how you count deaths. You know, in the US, particularly in New York, they're counting people with COVID as having died of COVID. In other countries, they're not. So are they using the same parameters? Are they using the same tests? How much noise is there in the tests? It's very hard to compare countries. What we know is that we missed this early on. Let me see. Somebody sent me this link. Let's see if this link is clearer. Yeah, but this doesn't help me either, right? Because it doesn't give me a comparison across countries. I'm sure I can get it. There it is, countries. But it doesn't really matter. The point is, the United States has been hit hard because we didn't test, we didn't isolate, we let the whole thing get out of hand, and we then, particularly where's it hurt us the most? In nursing homes. In where old people live. We've let it get into nursing homes. We didn't control it. Again, we didn't test enough people. And a lot of people have died as a consequence. So if you look here, total deaths, let's see. Deaths per million in the United States are 257, right? In Spain, they're 580, so more than double. In the UK, 489, more than double. In Italy, 514, more than double. In France, 415, almost double. In Belgium is the worst. Deaths per million in Belgium are 763. You know, one of the issues here about people who think this is all a conspiracy and that this is some kind of the America's left way of taking over the country, it's everywhere. I mean, Saudi Arabia is locking down. Is it a leftist, conspiracy to take over Saudi Arabia? Let's see, who else is worse than the U.S.? Sweden is worse than the U.S., 343 deaths per million. So even Sweden, they left everything open. Ireland, again, not a place that I think the left is trying to take over. But anyway, 303 deaths per million. I'm looking at other places that are worse than the U.S. I think that's about it. Syria is bad, but it's consistent with Western Europe. I mean, the best places that have had an outbreak but have very few deaths per million are places like Singapore, places like Taiwan, places like South Korea, places that tested, tracked, and isolated. I mean, everybody knows how to deal with a pandemic. It's just you have to execute. Oh, somebody said, yeah, this is a good comment. Could the fact that Americans has a huge obesity problem be a major factor in how numbers stack up against other countries that are not so obese? I don't see either political side willing to address this. Yes, it's not just obesity, and it's not, I don't know, you'd have to figure out, and you have to go into the stats. Is it obesity? Is it diabetes? Is it diabetes because of obesity? Is it heart disease? Is it cancer? Is it, other diseases? What exactly is causing it? But obesity could be a big factor here. And also age of the population. Also whether the population lives in multi-generational families. So if you look at New York, most of the people who died of this were poor. Lived in neighborhoods where old people lived with young people. Again, almost overwhelmingly, the people who die from this are old. Then it's a question of what is the condition of those old people. In Italy, most of the people who died are old. It's an old population. It's a population that interacts with young people frequently. It's a very huggy, warm, social population. And that was bad for them in this context, right? Because the virus transmits freely between individuals in those kind of conditions. And it hits old people worse than anybody else, so they suffered. So every country has its unique reasons why. Certainly health, the condition of the Americans, the fact that so many are obese, the fact that so many are sick with diseases like diabetes, certainly affected this. So yes, you would have to look down the countries and see, are there differences in terms of health status, obesity, things like that? And I just don't know enough about Belgium, for example. Why Belgium? Of all the countries, Belgium has the highest death per million of any country in the world. I don't know why. I guess it's interesting. Also timing. Like Russia has very, very low death per million. But that's because the virus is hitting Russia now. And people are still yet haven't died. So you've got very few recovered in Russia. You've got 242 that have the disease, total cases identified. 48,000 recovered. Spain has about the same total cases, but they already have 183 recovered. So what I'd expect is that over time, the number of people in Russia that are dying from this is going to accelerate. And again, if this was some leftist conspiracy to take over the United States, is it true that the left is trying to take over Russia? I don't think so. There has to be something. There's something here. There's something about this disease that is real. A lot about this disease that is real. All right, somebody sent me $2 to buy coffee. Is in an objectivist society, what should be done about immigrants who enter illegally without passing the test? What test? So in an objectivist society, assuming we've defeated our enemies, then, immigration is pretty much open. The only test they should pass is that they're not a criminal, not a terrorist, a simple background check. And maybe, that they don't have COVID or they don't have an infectious disease. That's it. Now, if they try to sneak in, then the assumption is that they're a terrorist or a criminal because there's such a simple way to come in. And then they should be treated as a criminal, right? Then the assumption is that they are not, that they should be just deported immediately. So somebody is trying to come in who has not, is not willing to have a background check. Should be just, the assumption should be that they are a criminal or a terrorist. Of course, if they're terrorists, you want to do the background check and put them in jail. But if they're just a criminal, you want to just kick him out. And in any case, you just want to kick him out. You make it so easy for people to come in that if they're not willing to abide by that simplicity, that ease, they're bad. And you just don't let them in. And you never let them in. That is my view. Most successful, the assumption has to be they're trying to hide something. How do you do a background check on something with no ID? Well, you figure it out, right? in today's world, with facial recognition and records all over the world and fingerprints and all this stuff, it's really that hard to find whether somebody has a what do you call it, a criminal record or not, or is wanted by some police force somewhere, or is in some way a bad guy. I mean, you know, if you do a background, you just, you know, if they're coming, there's certainly certain countries that you know might, you know, have a higher likelihood of criminals, or if they don't have, if they come from a country that doesn't have records, maybe you have to dig a little deeper. But yeah, I mean, this isn't rocket science. Really, this isn't rocket science. Right? And yeah, I believe that immigration is a right. It's a right of the immigrant to associate with whoever he wants, and my right to associate with whoever I want. It's a right of an immigrant to cross borders, and it's my right to invite an immigrant to come visit me. Yeah. This guy trained Mohammeds. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of terrorists are delightful. You know, I don't believe we should evaluate people based on how delightful they are. You evaluate people based on, you know, their background. It's not hard to do background checks. I mean, the idea, I mean, come on, guys. You have a CIA, an FBI, an NSA. You can't do background checks on people? You really have no clue. You really, really, really have no clue. You know, just ask the Israelis if they do background checks on people. Yeah, and they know a lot without, you know, but about the bad guys, not about everybody, because you don't need to know a lot about everybody. You need to know a lot about the bad guys, and it's easy to find people who are associated with the bad guys. It's not a hard thing to do. All right, let's see. Most successful business people in business are pragmatists. How do we combat this in the workplace to shape offices like BB&T? I mean, by preaching the philosophy, by advocating the philosophy, by showing people the evil of pragmatism, by, you know, just keep doing what we're doing, by getting them to read Atlas Shrugged, but by emphasizing that Atlas Shrugged is not just a book. There's a whole philosophy there, and it is a philosophy. And by getting people to study the philosophy, to understand the philosophy, by getting people to read OPA, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. Most business people are pragmatists because all they've been taught is altruism or pragmatism. You can't run a business on altruist principles. You cannot run a business on altruist principles. So the only alternative you have is to be a pragmatist. Well, we need to show them, and show them when they're young, before they've been conditioned. Show them what morality is about and what self-interest really is about. Right. All right, let's see. Many in the pro-lockdown crowd have ideas which cause them to want to control other people's lives. What's the difference between referring to ideas to analyze concrete events and conspiracy thinking? I know many people in the pro-lockdown movement who consider themselves objectivists. Not movement. People who are pro-lockdown who are objectivists. A lot of the objectivist doctors are pro-lockdown. Because their orientation is save lives. That's what they're trained for. And it's hard sometimes to broaden your context. But their orientation is to save lives. And when your orientation is to save lives, lockdown is the way to do it. So I don't view the pro-lockdown as uniform or completely nutty irrational. I think they're rational people that are pro-lockdown. I think they're wrong. I think they don't see the full context. I think they don't see the alternatives. They've been captured by this notion that there are only two ways to think about things. But I don't consider everybody who's pro-lockdown irrational or leftist or a conspiracist who want to control people. Now, a lot of people who are pro-lockdown want to control other people's lives. But yeah, everybody wants to control other people's lives. Who doesn't? I mean, the conservatives want to prevent a woman from having an abortion. That's controlling other people's lives. They don't want gay people to get married. That's controlling other people's lives. They don't want lots of things. They want us to sacrifice for the nation and for the state. That's controlling other people's lives. So everybody out there wants to control other people's lives. This idea that the left wants to do and the right doesn't is plain false. Trump would love to control other people's lives, and the internet, and Amazon, and he'd love to do all that. So would many Republicans. So would many Democrats. It's some people want to control every aspect of our lives. Those are authoritarians. You really have to watch for them, but they're on the right and on the left. Now, how do you differentiate between actual movements that want to impose themselves on us and conspiracy theories? Well, conspiracy theories tend not to have any real evidence supporting them. They tend to rely on marginal people with kooky ideas and who tend to be anti-scientific. I wish I can't think right now I can think of the 9/11 conspiracy theories. If you look at the 9/11 conspiracy theories, it tended to be people who don't trust anything the government does, anything. It's all trying to control every aspect of their lives. They tended to be, many of them tended to be anti-Semitic. It was the Jews. It was Israel. All the Jews left the building before the towers collapsed. Things like that. And so you sense racism or anti-Semitism. There's something weird going on here. And then they didn't know engineering. Oh, metal can't melt because of oil fuel when jet fuel burns and stuff like that. And you go, are you a civil engineer? Do you know this? And so you listen to two civil engineers that claim this, and these two civil engineers also happen to have a bunch of ideas about other things that are wacky and crazy. Why would I trust them on this when they have wacky ideas? So it's not difficult to peel away a few layers and discover when something is a conspiracy theory. It is just not grounded in reality. It's grounded in people's subjective views. And usually, the people who are deemed as experts on this are not credible people. And you can identify them as not credible by tracking down their careers, by seeing what's happened to them, by what they've done, and by looking at what people say about them, but trying to evaluate who here seems more rational. What's really going on? So conspiracy theory at the end of the day is detached from reality. It has no evidence to support it. And if the evidence is all cooked up and distorted and perverted, the evidence they supposedly prevent. But it's not real. It's, again, not connected to reality. Do you think we're heading for stagflation with all the money being injected into the economy? We're definitely heading towards stagnation. Whether it is accompanied by inflation, price inflation or not, I don't know. Money has to go somewhere. The question is, where will it go? I think right now it's gone into the stock market. Stocks have recovered. The NASDAQ is above where it was when it started the year. The NASDAQ is priced as if the world is unbelievably rosy and things are going to be amazing for a lot of companies. Not all of them. The NASDAQ is composed of a lot of companies that have gone down a lot. But as an index, it's up, which is bizarre, given the extent of the damage. If you heard Powell today, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, he thinks this is a major, major recession, the biggest since the Great Depression, and might even be a depression. So we're definitely going to get stagnation. Then the question is, where does the money flow to? Does it flow to consumer prices? And I just don't know. I don't think so. I think it's going to stay in assets for a while. And that's what happened after the Great Recession. I think that's what's going to continue for a while until it all comes tumbling down. But I don't think we're quite there yet. In some ways, I wish it was price inflation, because then it would be straight evident. Then printing money, get inflation. See, people, printing money is no good. The problem is when it's hidden, like in asset prices. And then it's hard to show people the real damage. The damage is hidden. And the worst damage is damage that's hidden. All right, last question. It's been a long night. How do you preserve the benevolent sense of life? And he says, I admire your show and your work. I'm focused on my values. So I know I talk a lot about politics, and I read a lot about politics, but I don't care a lot about politics. I care about me, and I care about the people I love and I like. I care about art, and I surround myself with the art. I care about the things that I can do with my life. I care about my values, my personal values. I care about my wife. I care about the things that are happening around me. And politics is part of that, and politics is part of my job, and I care about it as part of my work, as part of my career. But I don't let politics deter me from pursuing my values. Indeed, one of my values is this. One of my values is being a teacher. I love teaching. I love expressing my views. I love trying to educate you, trying to inspire you, trying to motivate you towards a better life. And to the extent that I do that, there's nothing I can do about the bad shit in the world. There's nothing I can change. I can't fire Trump. I can't get them to do test to track isolate. All I can do is hopefully help you be a better thinker, help you as a consequence be a better valuer, and therefore be a better liver, right? Live better. And that's my value. If I think about it in terms of I need to change the world tomorrow, then I'd be depressed. But I gave up on that a long time ago. You can't do that. That can be a goal. It might be, it can be the goal. I mean, John Galt could have that goal, but only as a subsidiary goal. The main goal is I want to get the best people in the world into a valley away from the parasites out there. And then, when everything fails, we'll build a better world. But that can't be the primary goal. The primary goal is to live the best life you can, surrounded by your values, by the things you love, by the things you care about, by the things you admire, by the people you admire, and make the most of this one precious opportunity you have on this earth to live the best life that you can live. And that's what I try to do. And that's what I'm focused on. And that's what I'm even focused on when I'm reading, studying, politics. And I have to say, I do get depressed, right? This does bring me down. I mean, it's hard. I've been saying on some of the shows, I'm sick and tired of talking about coronavirus, because I really am sick and tired of talking about coronavirus, because it really is, what's the point, right? I've said everything I have to say about it. Nothing's really changed. The evidence that keeps coming out only seems to support my arguments from the last 2 months. So why do I need... And the only thing that keeps me going is there's another mind out there. There's another human being out there that still hasn't gotten it. Can I use this as an example, as leverage, as a way into that mind to get them to become a valuer, become an egoist, become somebody rational, pursuing their rational self-interest? So I pursue this as a teacher more than anything else. And hopefully it works. Hopefully it helps some of you guys. But the situation is depressing. You can't, I don't watch the news. I've never watched the news for years now. I read what I need to read. I ignore the rest. And I focus on the things I love. Which means that I need to go now and sit with my wife and watch what is, for the second time, and I know you guys are sick of me mentioning this, but for the second time, go and watch Mr. Sunshine. We're watching it for the second time and having a blast doing it. Second time is even better than the first, because now you can tell what exactly is going on and who the characters are. It takes you, because it's in Korean and because the culture is so different, it's very hard the first time you watch it to follow it. This time it's much easier to follow it. So we're loving it, having a real blast. So I'm going to watch, yes, I know, Mr. Sunshine. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your week. Oh, if you haven't signed up for OCON, you should sign up for OCON. You can do so through the Ayn Rand Institute. Just do OCON 2020 live. It's on Friday. I'm giving the opening talk on the purpose of purpose. And then we've got a special announcement that is going to be a lot of fun about something exciting that's happening. And then I'm doing something on Saturday about the Ironman Institute. And yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a really good event. And Greg Salamieri is speaking, and Tara Smith is speaking, and I'm sure we've got lots of other speakers. So please, please engage. Andrew, I did answer your questions. I absolutely answered your question about fear. I don't think it's fear. I sense fear in Mark Cuban's response to Corona. Does pragmatism win someone afraid when things go badly? Yeah, because they don't know what to hang on to. See, yes, maybe I didn't answer that question. I thought I answered the question. Yes, because reality just shifted on you, and now you have to rethink everything. And rethinking everything is crazy, really, really hard. So fear definitely has an element that, oh my God, what am I going to do? What I used to think doesn't work anymore, it looks like. But it's partially because you didn't really integrate what you thought before. You didn't have it solid. So you're letting your emotion take over. You're letting your fear overwhelm you and force you to rethink everything. All right. Thanks, everybody. Don't forget, particularly in these times, your support matters a lot to keeping this show going. And to me, being able to devote as much time as I do to it. Your support is a lot of you are incredibly generous, but those of you who do not support the show yet, I'd really appreciate it if you'd consider doing so. I know the super chat is great, and it's great to see you on here, but what really helps is the predictability of support through the website, through PayPal, through Locals, or through Patreon, or Subscribestar. Any of those sources, it just makes it predictable. I know exactly what's coming in next month, and it makes expenses much easier. So if you don't yet support the show, please do so. YaronBrookShow.com/support. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to like. See you all probably Sunday. Maybe tomorrow, but certainly on Sunday. Bye.